Where is the money for lanes or alleys to come from? Well, the suburbs are full of wasted money. Why in the world was this developer forced to build a collector street? Whatever happened to the old system of having a street that had cars and houses on it? Why must this street be built and then this additional street be built also? This is a complete waste of money, which can be used in other ways. Besides, this, by being detailed, having the geometries of a highway, means that people speed. So first they build these high-speed streets, then they put speed bumps to hobble them. You know, why not use the natural system in which the natural narrowness of the street and the parked cars automatically make people go slowly? That's the old economical system. One other detail about this. It is not enough to just require open space. Like many codes have 30% open space. If all you ask is open space, the developers will give you this drivel on the edges, which they don't want anyway, which is perfectly useless. You should define your open space as accurately as you define your parking lots. Open spaces have actually four different categories: squares, greens, parks, and green belts. And each of them has a very precise definition. And they should be as closely coded as parking lots are coded. A square is a very specific animal, which if it is going to be used, it needs to be precisely designed, including it should not have an excessive size. The squares that work best are smaller squares. They have parking and paving requirements, which should be very, very precisely enunciated in a traditional code. Open space, this is really, it's just a maintenance problem, and it really does not form a focus of society. Another aspect which seems to be inoffensive, but it turns out to be of crucial importance, is this mania that planners have now developed for the dead worm street system. Like this. Why is it that this is so important to planners and developers to the extent that, for example, twice we have been summarily fired by developers for doing straight line layouts? Even though every single wonderful city and village in the world has straight streets. And all the boring suburbs in the world have curvilinear ones. All the places we love to visit have straight streets. And yet it is anathema to do it. If you want to waste a lot of money doing these hyper-expensive curvy streets, which in addition to that are completely confusing, the primary experience of being in the suburb in a layout like this is the stress of being lost. There's no way around it. That's what it feels like. You need specific instructions, first left, second right, and if you make the mistake or it's night, you're really in terrible shape. Why is this so important? Well, it's important because it terminates vistas. Apparently, or correctly, people do not like to look down the street and have the vista terminate somewhere in the haze, in the prairie. That is not a satisfactory feeling. And when you curve the street, it actually closes the vista in a systematic manner. In an unthinking manner, it is vaguely pleasant. But it's pleasant in the way that elevator music is pleasant. You can't remember what it does. And that's the problem. There's no system of orientations. Those of you who are planners have read Kevin Lynch's Image of the City, and it talks about how important it is for people to orient themselves, to know where they are by using landmarks. In a layout like this, it is completely impossible to achieve landmarks because the eye never rests on anything. Before the architect can respond, you've been taken away and nothing. You cannot focus on anything. It is not natural, as you can see. In fact, if you want to see how to use the land intelligently and in an ecologically sound manner that is very, very accurate about where the wetlands are and the subtleties, see what the farmers do. Whenever we have studied the layout of farmers, the small deflections and so forth that occur, this is really what the land requires, not this artificial curving. The way landmarks are to be used is not by making curvilinear streets, but by terminating vistas with memorable buildings. Those cities that we remember to be wonderful cities often have their important buildings in important locations. This is Charleston, South Carolina, where this important street ends there. Washington, D.C. is the primary city in the United States in which the vistas are terminated by important buildings, but Annapolis and and Williamsburg and many of the Texan and Florida courthouse towns have terminated vistas like that. You have quite a few here in San Antonio when streets deflect. In fact, when you look at an old planning book for up to 1930, there's page after page of intersections that look like this, in which what the book is proposing is all sorts of different ways by which the vista gives a special location so that architects can respond in a memorable way to the vista. Now, we have given, this particular book had over 20 of these. We gave it to our traffic engineer, and the traffic engineer determined that every single one was illegal. We also traveled with our traffic engineer, and he always finds that all of these are illegal. Now, we point out and say, but my dear sir, no one has crashed into this in 150 years, you see. That doesn't matter. It's not in the books. The assumption that is being made is that this, instead of being a narrow street in which cars go slowly by virtue of the parked cars and the smaller dimension, what the engineers assume is that this is a micro highway. And of course, in a standard Department of Transportation section, people will speed and they will hit that church. The drunk at midnight will actually hit that church sooner or later. See, this is not, you can't just do parts of it. You can't have intersections like these unless you at the same time reduce the street sections so that people slow up. It's very dangerous to do traditional urbanism on a partial basis because it tends to explode. You need to have the entire kit of parts. The entire kit of parts works beautifully. Now, this is a very important tool, determination of vistas, because it means that our civic buildings, which are no longer, we no longer have the model, we no longer have the money to build beautiful civic buildings. You know, we're no longer a rich country. So we build normal, dignified civic buildings, but they can be enormously enhanced by giving them honorable locations at the end of vistas. We just can't operate as planners unless we're permitted to terminate vistas with buildings. What happens is that the art of urban planning is removed from us. We can't act. We can no longer make beautiful cities unless intersections like these are recovered. It's of crucial importance. Another aspect of pedestrian life is only a detail, but it is as important as any other element. Notice that in cities where there's a pedestrian life, the curb radius is relatively small. In this case, in Boston, it's an 8-foot radius. It means that the pedestrian moving down the sidewalk, when that pedestrian arrives at a 24-foot paving, that crossing distance is only 24 feet, which is a doable distance. In the current mode of increasing curb radii, in this case it's a Miami residential neighborhood with 25, what happens is that the pedestrian moving down the sidewalk, instead of just crossing the 24 feet of paving, has to cross 48 feet of paving. Which means that the window of opportunity for crossing, if this one can be crossed, for example, in 7 seconds, this one needs to be crossed in 14 seconds. It needs 14 seconds to cross it. And of course, that instance of the 14-second gap occurs much more seldom than the 7-second gap. And so you tend to have pedestrian life die when this happens, The other thing that happens is that the cars don't have to slow up. This guy is tilting his car making that turn. He's not even touching the brake. What has happened in the United States is that traffic engineering standards, which used to have a full range from 15 miles an hour to 85 or God knows 100 miles an hour, each speed having a whole series of geometrical requirements, centerline radii, curb radii, and so forth. Back in the 1950s or 60s, the whole bottom end of the manual was removed. And we no longer can design streets that are less than 35 miles an hour. That is the fundamental problem that is happening here. And in fact, the push is now still in the other direction. In Miami now, the Public Works Department is proposing 40-foot right-of-ways, which means you can do that easily at 40 miles an hour, perhaps even at 50 for a decent driver. What does 50-mile-an-hour turns have to do with a residential neighborhood? What's happening is that the traffic engineers are considered the solution to our traffic problems, the only solution to our traffic problems, and they're being given an absolutely free hand to make the traffic flow as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible at the expense of other issues, such as public life.